Hey everyone, welcome back to my Python programming series. In today's lesson, we're going to be talking about operators. So the first thing to know is that Python contains a lot of operators and different operators. So in this tutorial, I won't be going over all the operators in Python because there's simply too many of them to go through in a video. But I will be going through the main ones, the ones that I use most often. But the rest of them are going to be available on the Python documentation page. I will link it below in the description, so you can go and check it out if you're really interested in it. So firstly, we're going to start with arithmetic operators. First operator that I'm going to start with is the addition sign. So it's just like it is in mathematics, it's just the plus sign. And basically this works with integers and floats. So let's say we have like 1 plus 3. See, that works, gives us back an integer. And we can also do stuff with floats. So we can add floats to integers, which is pretty neat. Now, a cool part of Python is that it does support string concatenation, which is basically the addition of two strings, and list concatenation or addition. So I'm going to go ahead and show you that. Basically, we have a string called A, and then it's, I don't know, hello. And then we have a string B, which is going to be world. We can add these two strings by using the addition operator to give us a hello world. Basically, all Python does is it just slaps these two strings together. Now, as I mentioned, this also does work for lists. So if we define a list that contains 1, 2, 3, and then we define another list which contains 4, 5, well, we can add these two lists together by using the addition operator or the plus operator. And as you can see, it's just, again, this list plus this list, so it just adds it on to the end right here. Now, the next operator that I'm going to be talking about is the subtraction operator or the minus sign. Obviously, this works with regular integers, so we can do like 1 minus 2. We can do something like that and get a negative value back. We can also use it with floats, but we can't use this with strings or lists. I can kind of show you that. Again, A was the string over here, hello, and B was world. Obviously, it doesn't make sense for us to be subtracting strings, and likewise with lists. It doesn't make sense to be subtracting lists. So that's why the minus operator is not supported for strings and lists. The next symbol is the multiplication symbol, so it's just a simple asterisk. We can use this on integers, we can use this on floats, and the cool thing is also that we can use it on strings and lists. Now, before I move on, I just want to address this right here. The reason this is happening right here is because of the memory. One of the few things to note is that float values, they're precise, but they're generally not, but they could be off sometimes. Like in this case right here, if we go onto like the Windows calculator and just do 3.7 times 3, well, it's gonna be 1.1, but as you can see in Python, it has this extra 1 over here. And again, that has to do with memory. It's generally good practice to try and avoid checking if two floats are equal or if two floats aren't equal, just because of stuff like this. This isn't really a mistake, it's just the way memory works in Python, and this does happen in other languages too. So moving on, say we have that same string hello. If we multiply this string by 3, the cool part is that Python will just basically slap 3 of the hellos together, or whatever the string value contained in A will be. We can also do that with lists. So if we have the list 1, 2, 3, well, if we multiply this by 3, again, we're going to get the same list basically 3 times. So as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. This right here is pretty good to initialize a list of like zeros or something like that. Let's say we want to have like a list of like 10 zeros. You could do something like that, and then you're going to get this initialized list instead of writing out like 0, 0, 0 a bunch of times. Now, the next operator we're going to be talking about is the double star, which is the power or exponentiation operator. It's supported for integers because it makes sense. It's also supported for floats, so we can do something like that. And again, we're getting this little inaccuracy over here because of the memory. However, this double asterisk or exponentiation is not supported for strings and lists, just because, well, it doesn't really make sense. Moving on, the division operator is simply the slash, and an interesting thing to note, in some languages the single slash is integer division, which I will talk about in the next operand, but in Python the division sign, just the single slash, is proper division. So if we do something like 6 divided by 2, obviously that'll give us 3. By the way, it does always default to a float value for division. Another thing to note is that if we do something like 9 divided by 2, it's going to give us these little decimal values after the integer part, which is the 4. Proper division is supported for, obviously, integers and floats, and not lists and strings, because it doesn't make sense to be dividing lists or dividing strings. As I mentioned, there is the integer division in Python, which is the double slash, which will only give us the integer value of the division or the quotient. So in the case where we had 9 divided by 2, well, this will give us 4 just because it is the whole part or the integer part of this quotient right here. And again, this integer division works for integers and floats. And again, it doesn't make sense to have it implemented for strings and lists because it doesn't make sense to do an integer division on either one of them. The last arithmetic operator that I'm going to talk about is the modulo or the mod, or it's the percent sign. This is tied in with modular arithmetic. If you don't know it yet, I might make a lesson in the future about it, but I'm sure you can just Google it pretty quick. It just basically finds the remainder upon division. So in the case of 9 mod 2, well, that will be a remainder of 1, and that's corresponding to this half right here. Modular arithmetic is supported for integers and floats in Python, and obviously not lists or strings because it doesn't make sense with those two. So that's it for arithmetic operators. There's a couple of them. I'm not sure, there might be a few others in Python. You'd have to go check out the Python documentation. Again, I'll leave a link to that in the description. But moving on, we're going to be talking about assignment operators. If you haven't seen my previous video, I talked about the equal sign or the assignment operator. If you haven't checked it out, I'm going to leave a card to it right now at the top right. I'll also leave a link in the description to that video, but go check it out. I kind of talk about it a little bit. But basically all we do is when we say something like, okay, x equals 5, what Python does is it looks to the right hand side of this assignment operator, evaluates whatever expression is here, and then assigns the final value of that expression to the variable on the left. So once we execute this line right here, x will now be holding the value 5, and I can show you just by logging it right here. Now the next few assignment operators, there's actually a whole bunch of them, but I'll only be going over the main ones, but they all kind of follow the same pattern. So the first one is the plus equals. Basically what this does is if we write something like x plus equals 3, what this is a shorthand for writing x is equal to x plus 3. All Python is doing is it's incrementing the current value of x by 3, and then we basically store it back into that variable x that we had. So if I were to log x now, you could see that it's changed to 8. Before it was 5, now we've incremented it by 3, or we've added 3 to it, and now it's 8. Likewise, we can do with minus equals. So if we write something like x minus equals 3, as you can see, x is now equal to 5, and that is shorthand for writing x is equal to x minus 3. It's just a little more convenient to write this instead of this whole expression over here. The next one is the multiply equals, and you can almost guess what it does. Basically, if we write x times equals 3, well, that's going to multiply the value, the current value of x by 3, and then it's just going to store it back in our variable x. So now if I log x, before it was 5, and now we've multiplied it by 3, it should be 15. There it is, 15. And the last one that I'm going to be talking about is the divide equals. If we divide it by 3, well, it's just going to go back to x being 5. So if I log x now, it's 5.0. And again, it's going to default to being a float because division always returns a float. Those are the assignment operators. There's a whole bunch more, but you can see they all follow the same pattern. Basically, this is the operator that you're going to apply to the current value of x, and then you're just going to store that value back in the variable itself. So now moving on to comparison operators, there's a few of them, but they're all fairly self-explanatory. So the first one is the double equal sign, and that's basically to check for equality. And I'm going to stress that this is, we're checking if the content of the two items or objects are equal to each other, not the actual objects in memory themselves. We'll go over that a little bit later, and I'll kind of dive into a little more depth about it. But if we were to write something like 5 is equal to 5, well, obviously that's true. But if we were to write something like 5 is equal to 4, that's obviously false. And this is supported for strings and lists, and a bunch of other stuff in Python have the double equal sign implemented for their class. Now the not equals is just the exclamation mark equals sign. So we can write something like 5 is not equal to 5. And obviously this is false because they are equal to each other. There's the false. Or we can write something like 4 is not equal to 5, and that's obviously true. So double equals checks for equality, exclamation mark equals checks for inequality. Now the next few are very self-explanatory. I'm sure you've seen them a lot. So the greater sign, we can use that for like integers, let's say. So 5 is greater than 4 will return as true. And obviously there's the less than operators, and then there's the greater than equals operator or the less than equals operator. So all these comparison operators will return us a Boolean, whether the statement that we wrote holds or it doesn't, like we see in all of these examples. Moving on to the logical operators in Python, we have 3 of them, I believe. So we have and, we have or, and then we have not. So those logical operators act like the regular logical operators. If you haven't yet come across these in your computing courses or anywhere else, I suggest you look into truth tables of like ands, nots, and ors. But yeah, there's a few set of conditions where like the and is true and where the or is true. But for an and clause to be true, it would require that all of the logical statements that you wrote need to be true as well. So if I were to write something like 5 equals 5 and 4 equals 4, well, that's true because the left side is true and the right side is true. If either one of these were to be false, then the entire statement would be false as well. However, for an or statement, any of the logical statements that you write have to be true in order for the entire expression to be true. So you can see right here, if I write a true statement, which is 5 equals 5, and then I write or 4 is not equal to 4, which is obviously false, this is still going to evaluate to true just because of the way the or operator works. And obviously the not operator, it's a negation. So if we were to have a statement like 5 equals 5, this is true, but then if we were to write not 5 equals 5, obviously it's going to give us false. Now I'm going to move on to membership operators, and it's basically just the in operator, but I guess you can include not in as well. So this is a keyword in Python, and it basically checks if something is in something else. So C is this list 1, 2, 3, and then we can check like, oh, 1 in C. This is going to return us true if 1 is in the C collection, which is a list. And as you can see, it's true here because 1 is contained within C. Or we do something like 4 in C, and obviously this is going to return false. And obviously we can write something like 4 not in C, and this is just going to be the negation of the 4 is in C statement. So again, the in is just a membership operator. It checks if something is in a collection or not. The last operator that I'm going to be talking about is the identity operator, or the is operator. And this is the one that I was talking about with the double equal sign. So to go over it, the double equal sign compares content, whereas the is operator, it checks if the two things we're comparing are the same object in memory. So just to show an example, if I were to do something like A and then A is equal to this list of 1, 2, 3, and then B is equal to 1, 2, 3, what you can see from here is that it's the same contents within the list. However, these are two separate lists and they're in two separate spots of memory. So A and B are pointing to two completely different objects. This is one list and this is a whole separate other list. So if we were to use the equality operator, check if these two lists are equal, obviously it's true because again, the double equal sign checks for content equality. So they do have the same contents within the list 1, 2, and 3. But if we were to do A is B, obviously that is false because, well, they are two separate lists, like I mentioned. They're not the same list. If we were to do something like A is equal to B now, basically pointing this A value to this list right here, well, in that case, A is going to equal to B, and B is going to be A because, well, they're pointing at the same list now that we have reassigned it right here. So that's it for this quick little tutorial on Python operators. Obviously, there's a lot more, like I mentioned. Just check the link in the description if you're curious about them. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If it's helped you out at all, please like, comment as to what it helped you out with. Like usual, if you're new to the channel, please like, comment, and subscribe. It's greatly appreciated. I will catch you guys in the next video.